Computers, like cars, are both complex systems. So let's say that you want to buy the fastest car available, right? How do you make that decision? You could just base it on a single number that you see in an advertisement, like horsepower. But the Ford F-150 pickup has more horsepower than a Porsche 911 Carrera. Does that mean that the Ford goes faster? Probably not. It's really hard to sum up the performance or the experience of using a vehicle just by looking at one number, right? Certain vehicles perform better in certain situations than others. And the same is true for computers. It's really hard to try to gauge how good a computer is going to work for you and your needs just by looking at a single number. But there are some rules of thumb that can help you pick the right machine for your needs. Now, the heart of any computer is the processor. And a processor is just an integrated chip that has a piece of silicon etched with transistors, right? When people say that a computer is just a box filled with switches, the switches they're referring to are actually transistors. In this case, billions of transistors etched onto a single piece of silicon and embedded in a single chip. Now, the more transistors you can put onto a processor, the more work that processor can do. In computing, we often refer to Moore's Law. Moore's Law was created by Gordon Moore, one of the founders of Intel, and he predicted that we would be able to double the number of transistors in processors every other year. And that prediction has held true for most of the PC's existence. Although in the last 10 years, we've actually seen the growth in transistors slow down, and we're actually pretty far below Gordon Moore's prediction for where we should be. Now, the reason for that is kind of interesting, but we're going to have to discuss that in another video. So you know that the processor is the brain of the computer, and somebody tells you that clock speed measures how fast the processor runs. And so you think, well, if I want a fast running computer, all I need to do is pick the processor that has the highest clock speed. That should give me the fastest computer. But as it turns out, not all processors are built the same. So picture a long Viking ship with rows of people holding long oars that go out into the water. Clock speed measures the speed of the guy in front with the big drum, that every time he hits the drum, people pull on the oars. The faster he beats that drum, the more rowing gets done every minute. But some processors might be designed for mobile devices or for cheaper computers. Those are kind of like Viking ships that have fewer rowers. They're pulling their oars at the same rate, but they're getting less work done with every beat of the drum. Some systems don't have a dedicated graphics card, and that means that clock cycles on the processor have to be used to put images on the screen, which is a pretty intensive process. That would be like having a Viking ship where half of the rowers had to peel potatoes every time they heard a drum beat. It's still useful work, but it's not getting Photoshop to load any faster. And some processors have more cores than others. A core is sort of a processing unit. It can perform operations on data, right? For most of the PC's existence, processors only had one core. But then we needed to get more efficient, right? We had to increase the performance of processors without having them take more energy and drain battery life. And so it turns out that it's much more efficient to have a single processor that runs at the same speed but has more cores. Think of cores as sort of like a whole separate room of Viking rowers, right? You could have one ship that has 4 rooms of Viking oars, each one taking the ship in different directions. Okay, I think we're gonna have to ditch that Viking analogy. It's no longer making sense. So let's just talk about processors in the real world. The Intel Celeron processor has 2 cores. That makes it cheaper to manufacture than an Intel i7, but it means that it does less work per clock cycle. Whereas the i7 has 4 cores, so it can do more work per clock cycle. But that's only if the software can actually take advantage of the 4 cores. See, this is already getting complicated. And then there's RAM. RAM is just the working memory of your computer. Everything you run is run from RAM. The more RAM you have, that means the more things you can do and the bigger programs you can use. Programs like Photoshop or video editing programs like Final Cut Pro use a lot of RAM. Whereas something like Word maybe uses less. So if you're using Word, you might be okay with 4 gigs of RAM. But if you're going to do something more intense, you want more RAM, right? 8 gigs at least. And this is also true if you're going to do multiple things at the same time. If you want to download stuff from the internet while watching movies, while playing a video game, all on the same machine, you're going to need a lot of RAM. And that's before you get into all the bells and whistles of various features that you can find on a computer. So then if you're going to spend a lot of money on a computer, how do you pick the right one? Well, I would suggest you start with the big question, the one that matters most. How do you plan on using it? A big desktop computer is always the cheapest way of buying big performance. All right, if you want to do video editing with motion graphics, chances are you're going to be very disappointed with a laptop, or you're going to spend $3,000 or $4,000 on that laptop. So unless you're a hotel heiress, you're probably going to be better off buying a desktop computer if you need performance. The advantage of that is you can plug it into the wall. You don't have to worry about battery life, which means that you can have a really fast processor, and you can also have a huge monitor. If you're going to do video editing or graphic design, that screen real estate really makes a big difference to your work experience. But no portability. You can't work from the road. Now, laptops are a great balance of portability and performance. But now you have to worry about battery life, and that means you get exposed to some trade-offs. You can get great features like a large 17-inch screen. You can get a fast processor. You can even get a dedicated graphics card to have great performance for video games like you might find on a lot of gaming laptops. But the problem is all of these things kill battery life. And who wants a laptop that only lasts for 2 hours? Now, manufacturers can compensate for this. They just put in bigger batteries. And that's why most gaming or high-performance laptops weigh a ton. Now, you may not think about it now, but after a year of lugging this thing around in a big bag every time you have to go to work, you may regret it. You may actually wish you had bought the smaller, lightweight laptop. At the end of the day, the best may not be the fastest. It's the one that provides you with the best experience. Ultralight laptops may not be the best choice if you have a really resource-hungry program like AutoCAD for computer-aided drafting. But if all you're going to do is check your email, surf the web, maybe write a term paper or two, you may actually find you have a much better experience with an ultralight laptop that you can just slide into a nice bag and walk around campus with. Of course, if that's all you're going to do with your computer, you might be a great candidate for a tablet. Tablets are super lightweight, very portable, easy to carry around. They have intuitive touch interfaces, and they can do things like help you to read your email, surf the web, or even write a paper if you have a separate Bluetooth keyboard very easily. They're great at all of those things. They can't do everything that a laptop can do, but if your needs are less, they might be a great choice. The only problem with a tablet is you really have to consider your content universe. Right now, both tablets and smartphones are tied to what we call a content universe, right? They're sort of represented by the stores of the big three companies. Apple has iTunes and their App Store, Google has the Google Play Store, and Amazon is just Amazon. But when you buy one of these devices, you're sort of tying yourself to getting content, apps, music, movies, from that particular store. And not everything you buy in one store can be used on other devices. I mean, if you buy a program for your HP laptop and then later decide to replace that laptop with a Dell, it's no problem. You can just install that program on the new machine. But if you buy something from the Google Play Store, an app, let's say, you're never going to be able to use that app on an iPad or an Amazon Fire. Well, you can jerry-rig the Fire to run Google Play apps, but you have to visit a lot of nerdy websites to figure out how to do it, and Amazon would really prefer you not. So it's a good idea before you buy to check the store for the device that you want to purchase and make sure it can do all the things you want it to do. If your business uses Office 365, then you probably want to make sure you get a device that has some sort of mobile application to allow you to access Office 365. And you have to consider the content you already own. Music is usually easy enough to move from one device to the other, but movies and television shows are often protected by something called DRM, Digital Rights Management, that make it so that that movie you bought in iTunes will only play on an iPad, and you won't be able to watch it on the new Android tablet that you just bought. To be honest, it is not the most consumer-friendly of systems, and I'm sure it will evolve over time. But right now, it's the system that we have, and I just want you to be aware of it before you make any big decisions. When you're planning on making a big technology purchase, you just have to weigh the trade-offs. We would all love mobile devices with huge screens and batteries that lasted forever, but it's just not possible yet. But then again, if I could go back in time to 1995 and show the younger version of myself a brand new Microsoft Surface Pro tablet, his mind would have been blown. Like, and in the end, I don't mind if you dislike having to make a trade-off. I just never want you to be surprised by one you didn't realize you were making. Did you know that the average American replaces their cell phone every 18 months? I have leftovers in my freezer older than that.